Mastering Diabetes with Cyrus Khambatta and Robby Barbaro. So that's what we'll yak about today.
Diabetes. I get sugar diabetes. I got too much love and one sweet kiss. Sugar diabetes is on my list.
What's up, everybody? I'm David Yak here for Yak About Today. You know, when I'm out and about or at a dinner or a gathering, I'm always fascinated by your opinions, thoughts, and questions. And before I sit down in front of this mic, I look for answers to your questions, share your thoughts, and bring you the latest information from the best people I can find. So, if all this is of interest to you, then this is the place you want to be. So get up, put your headphones on, go for a run, and listen to what we yak about today.
Run smack dab into me. I get sugar diabetes. I get sugar diabetes. I got too much sweetness and one little kiss. Sugar diabetes is on.
So, I've been thinking about a conversation we had at dinner the other night. We were talking about Bill's type 1 diabetes and all the technology out there that allows him to track his blood sugars. What was interesting is that the two other people at the dinner chimed in and said they also had diabetes, but they had type 2. We talked about the fact that we have no memory when we were young of so many people being diabetic. So after dinner, I went to the Google machine, thanks Joe, and found that according to the CDC, diabetes is increasing at an alarming rate in the United States. The National Diabetes Statistics Report for 2017 found that cases of diabetes have risen to an estimated 30.3 million. Type 1 diabetics account for 5% of all diagnosed cases of diabetes, affecting approximately 1.5 million people, and the rest is type 2. So to help us understand more about diabetes, and in particular how a plant-based diet can help, I've invited Cyrus Khambatta and Robby Barbaro here to tell us more about it. They are the co-founders of Mastering Diabetes, a coaching program that teaches people how to reverse insulin resistance via low-fat, plant-based, whole food nutrition. Cyrus has been living with type 1 diabetes since 2002 and has an undergraduate degree from Stanford University and a Ph.D. in nutritional biochemistry from UC Berkeley. Robby was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in 2000 and has been living a plant-based lifestyle since 2006. Hey, welcome, guys. I'm really happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation to be here today.
All right.
Excited to talk to you today.
All right. So, guys, and you could divide this up between yourselves. It's going to seem like a silly question, but it's not, especially after this dinner I had the other night. First, people don't know exactly what diabetes is. They know something about producing insulin, and it's not, right? So just tell us the story of what diabetes is to begin with.
Okay, this is a really good question because I think it's gotten more confusing over time. There are multiple types of diabetes. There's actually type 1 diabetes, type 1.5 diabetes, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, and gestational diabetes. So you can really think of there as being 5 different classical versions of diabetes. Now, let's walk through each one of them. Type 1 diabetes is what I'm living with. It's what Robby's living with. And it's what has traditionally been referred to as juvenile onset diabetes that affects young kids, 2 years old, 3 years old, 8 years old, 15 years old. And it's an autoimmune condition, which means that your immune system has been deceived or tricked into believing that the beta cells inside of your pancreas that are responsible for manufacturing and secreting insulin are dangerous. So as a result, your own immune system is actually attacking those beta cells and killing those beta cells, which then compromises your ability to secrete insulin. So that's type 1 diabetes that generally affects younger people less than the age of 30. Type 1.5 diabetes is the exact same thing that I just described. However, there's 2 main differences. The first is that it affects people over the age of 30. And the second is that it's a slower progressing version of type 1 diabetes. So you can think of it as sort of a weaker autoimmune reaction, even though it still is an autoimmune reaction. So type 1.5 is just adult onset, slow progressing type 1 diabetes. Then you have pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes. Now, these are the type of diabetes that are caused by your lifestyle. It's caused by living a sedentary lifestyle, by not moving around very much, by not exercising, by also eating a very high-fat diet, or by eating packaged and refined carbohydrate-rich foods. And pre-diabetes, you can think of it as being a warning sign that type 2 diabetes is about to happen. Type 2 diabetes is what happens when pre-diabetes progresses over the course of time. But the beauty is that even if you have developed prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, in more than 80% of all cases, you can actually reverse both conditions and become non-diabetic once again. And then finally, we have gestational diabetes. And gestational diabetes is, you can think of it as like a temporary form of diabetes that affects women during pregnancy. And so they get diagnosed with diabetes, which means their blood glucose gets a little bit more variable. And it can negatively affect not only the mom's health, but also negatively affect the health of the growing fetus. So gestational diabetes tends to go away once a woman has already given birth. But interestingly, there's some research that shows that women who are living with gestational diabetes dramatically increase their risk for the development of type 2 diabetes after they give birth. So it's sort of, again, gestational diabetes is a warning sign that type 2 diabetes could develop over the course of time.
All right. What I'm really curious about from your personal experience, and maybe Robbie, you can take this one. The moment that you find out that you're diabetic, first, how did you know you were diabetic? What started happening? And the moment you found out, what did you start doing? Was it traditional? You went to the doctor. The doctor says, okay, you have diabetes. You need insulin. Stab yourself here, right? Take your insulin and test your blood sugar. What's the process, both emotionally and sort of, the routine that you had to go into?
I'll share my personal story. So my older brother was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 9 years prior to me. And so I was actually very familiar with the condition and sort of self-diagnosed myself. I was thirsty all the time, and I was going to the bathroom all the time. And I said, Mom, I think I have diabetes just like Steve. She said, no, you don't have diabetes. Don't be silly. So I ignored her for a little bit longer. Eventually, she was out of town. She called to check in and said, hey, what's going on? Has everything going at home? I said, Mom, I couldn't sleep last night. I was cramping. She said, okay, go upstairs, use your brother's blood glucose meter and test yourself. And I was well over 400. A normal healthy blood glucose is going to be somewhere between 80 and 130. And right then and there, my brother said, you have type 1 diabetes. Pack your bags. You're going to be in the hospital for a few nights.
How did he know that you had type 1? Just because he had type 1?
Well, after I had all the symptoms, which is urinating all the time and being thirsty all the time, then when you're young and you're losing weight and your blood glucose is over 400, that's going to be type 1 diabetes. When you're living with something like type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, that's usually going to happen when you are overweight. There's some lifestyle concerns going on here. And with those conditions, you're not going to see a blood glucose in the 400s, especially in the early stages. So they're going to be a little bit more slightly elevated. It's going to be a much slower onset, whereas type 1, type 1.5, it happens very quickly.
What was your emotional response?
I felt really lucky to have a family that just said, you know what? It's an inconvenience. Don't worry about it. You're going to still be able to live your life just the way you want. All your dreams can come true. All you have to do is take better care of yourself. And Cyruss and I, both in hindsight, we see it as a blessing at this point. We believe we are healthier now than we would be if we did not get this diagnosis and be encouraged to take care of ourselves. And there's metrics that we have. The fact that we have this data. I'm wearing a continuous glucose monitor. My cell phone tells me what my blood glucose is every 5 minutes.
Is that the Dexcom?
I have a Dexcom G6.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm trying to convince the other half to get one of those.
It's a great decision. There's some nuances about how to manage it, but it's a great decision. And, I want your listeners here on this show to be sort of ahead of the curve and let them hear it now that this new concept of called time in range is going to be more important than A1C for people living with type 1 diabetes. Right. Time in range is basically using these devices that monitor your blood glucose 24/7 and providing you with data to say, how much time do you spend in a healthy range during a 24-hour period? you can get a great A1C going high and going low all the time and then averaging it out. And so for those who don't know what an A1C is, that's your average blood glucose value over the course of 3 months. So this one number can give you an indication of how well are you managing your diabetes.
Hey, Cyrus, maybe you can tell us your story, but let's take it a step further. At a certain point, you put together what you needed to live healthier. You started investigating plant-based diets. Take us through the process, because Robby said, probably for him, it forced him into being probably healthier than he would have been otherwise, right? So I think what we're trying to do, and I'm not sure exactly how to articulate this for the audience, but a lot of the audience that I know who are type 2 diabetics, they're doing a few things. Maybe they're walking in the morning, that type of thing. But they really have not embraced a major lifestyle change that would actually reverse what they're doing. So maybe, Cyrus, you can take us from your story and how you sort of went in the direction that you went.
Absolutely. So I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 22. So it was actually a late onset type 1 diabetes. And I was at a time in my life where I was just going through college, trying to graduate and move on with my life. I got actually diagnosed with 3 autoimmune conditions. The first one was Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, which is where your thyroid gland cannot produce a sufficient amount of thyroid hormone. The second one is called alopecia universalis, which is why I have no hair, I have no eyebrows, no eyelashes, no ear hair, no nose hair. I can't grow chest hair to save my life. And then in addition to that, I also developed type 1 diabetes, and all 3 of those set in within a 6-month period.
And they're all autoimmune diseases. Is that right?
Yes, all 3 of those are autoimmune conditions. Exactly right. And what was interesting is that all 3 of them set in within a 6-month period. And I did not understand why. Even the doctors, when I was in the hospital, they turned to me and they said, we've never seen anybody with this combination of autoimmune conditions before. You're very interesting. Can we talk about you at our next team huddle? And so that was, okay, fine. So it's an interesting story, but at the same time, I was a little scared because, if the doctors didn't really know how to treat me, then what did that mean for me? So, it took me about a year to decide that I was ready and willing to completely change my lifestyle, to manage type 1 diabetes with precision. And the first year, I definitely was making small changes to my lifestyle. I was adopting, I was lowering my carbohydrate intake. I was eating a low carb diet, as you've probably seen advertised on television. And I was doing the sort of like traditional methods here of trying to limit my intake of fruits and potatoes and rice and quinoa, because I was led to believe that those foods would actually make me more diabetic and they would increase my insulin use. So point being, it took me a while to get to a point where I decided I wanted to change. And once I did, diabetes became the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I am so much healthier today than I ever have been. And I attribute this to diabetes without question.
All right, we're back. I am here with Cyrus Khambatta and Robby Barbaro, and we're talking about diabetes, and I think we're going to move into how you all moved into a plant-based diet, and maybe you can tell us about it, and maybe you can give us sort of the history of how you found it and what the results are. And I guess, Cyrus, you go first.
Okay, great. So the first year that I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, I was told to follow a low carbohydrate diet. And what that means is that I was limiting my intake of many plant-rich foods. So I wasn't eating very many fruits. I wasn't eating very many potatoes. I was trying to limit my intake of rice and beans and quinoa and whole grains. And instead, I was eating things like turkey burgers and salmon and fish and chicken and peanut butter and cheese. And the reason you would want to do this, or the reason that I was told to do this, is because we're told over and over again, you probably see this in the news, that when you eat carbohydrates make your blood glucose go higher, and they make you more diabetic, and then they're going to make you more overweight. And as a result of that, you're going to end up with more disease in the future. So I believed that story at that time. For the first year of living with diabetes, my blood glucose was supposed to be controllable on a low carbohydrate diet, and it was the exact opposite. It was literally a disaster. Every time I checked my blood glucose, it was either in the 300s or it was below 70, and both of those are considered dangerous.
All right, we hit a bit of a glitch, but I think, Cyrus, you were talking about the transition to plant-based diets, how you made that transition. How did you actually start from the very beginning? You know, is it something you knew? Is it something you researched? Is it something that other people taught you?
Yeah, so at the time that I knew that there was a problem with my blood glucose because it was very uncontrollable, my insulin use was going up. I also just felt very low energy and couldn't exercise properly. I knew that there was a problem. I just didn't know what the answer was. So I just started looking for information. I got a recipe book, and then I started looking online. I started talking with people, and one thing led to another, and I got opened to this idea that if I started to eat more plants and I became sort of more of a plant-based eater, that my health could drastically improve and my ability to control my blood glucose would also improve. So at that time in my life, I mean, this is 2003, before plant-based diets were really popular. They weren't considered cool at that time. And I decided, you know what, if it's going to make me feel better than I currently feel right now, let's try it out. So I switched over to a plant-based diet, and I did so under the guidance of a nutrition guru named Dr. Doug Graham. And he showed me how to start eating a lot more plants and start to substitute those foods for animal products. So I went from eating, chicken, fish, meat, eggs on a daily basis to none of that, and just started replacing those with lots of fruit and lots of vegetables. It was a very simple change. It just required sort of like a dedicated approach. And within the first week, I saw unbelievable progress. My energy levels, that's the first thing I noticed, is that my energy levels went sky high. I was more hydrated. I felt genuinely happier to be awake. In addition to that, my blood glucose had fallen dramatically, and my insulin use was coming down dramatically. So within the first week, I was able to cut back on my insulin use by almost 40%. And my blood glucose was just so much more controllable. It was like this giant light bulb went off in my head. So I was so excited by this process that I went back to graduate school to go get a Ph.D. in nutritional biochemistry so that I could understand the science. And I could actually start to learn if I was just some weird freak of nature, or if what was happening to me was actually something that was applicable to other people. And in the process, I started to learn that, the scientific community knows a lot about plant-based diets. And there's actually a whole bunch of research that sort of backs up all of the changes that I had seen in my body. And once I started to learn this, it started to make a lot of sense to me that it was time to try and take this information and spread it to the world, to try and teach people living with all forms of diabetes how they can also transition to a more plant-centric diet. And by doing so, they can reverse prediabetes and type 2 diabetes and get phenomenal control over type 1 diabetes.
Hey, Robbie, maybe you should both take a stab at this, and I'll take notes. But why don't you give me a day's meal plan? You wake up in the morning, and maybe it's not just 3 meals, maybe it's, a bunch of plants being eaten and fruits during the course of a day. Give me, Robbie, you take it.
So I really want to put this into context here, because I'm sure many of the people listening to this show are familiar with the ketogenic diet. That's very popular. The low carbohydrate diet is very popular, especially for people living with diabetes. They're trying to manage their blood glucose. So say, okay, you know what? I can't eat things that are high in carbohydrate because that's going to make my blood glucose level higher. If somebody is following a dedicated ketogenic diet, they will eat roughly 210 grams of total carbohydrate per week. Cyrus and I will eat more than that in one lunch meal. In one lunch meal, we will eat more carbohydrate than a ketogenic dieter will eat in an entire week. And let me give you the kicker here, David. We will use less insulin. So a ketogenic dieter, they'll eat 30 grams of carbohydrate per day. This is published research, and inject 30 units of insulin. That's a 1-to-1 ratio over a 24-hour period. Cyrus and I will eat over 700 grams of carbohydrate and inject less than 30 units in any given day. So it's a dramatic change. And I want to bring this home for your audience, okay? You said 90 to 95% of people are living with prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. And so what we're trying to do here is address insulin resistance. That's the cause of prediabetes and type 2. What Cyrus and I are showing in our own personal display is that we are very insulin sensitive. We're showing people how to make insulin work again, how to make insulin open up the doors so glucose can go out of your bloodstream into your cells. We're doing that through low-fat, plant-based whole food nutrition. So I wake up in the morning, I eat lots of fruit. My breakfast today, it was mixed greens with blueberries, papaya, and mangoes. About 180 grams of carbohydrate for breakfast. For lunch, I'm going to go for more fruit. I'm going to have some cherimoya. I'm going to have some white sapote. These are fruits people might not have heard about. But when you get into this diet, you get to eat all kinds of new foods you have never even tried. And a lot of them are right under your nose at the grocery store. So lunch is going to be more fruit, more greens. And then, again, personally, I'm going to eat an afternoon snack, more fruit. Dinner is going to be a big salad. And people who, pick up our book and get our recipes in there, that's going to have a lot of things like bean burritos. There's going to be a lot of soups in there. There's going to be a lot of bowls. We put together bowls. You mix quinoa, you put some beans in there, you put some greens, you put some spices. That's how it's done. It's very, very simple, but it's delicious and it's convenient and it's not expensive to eat this way.
I have a question, silly question, and either one of you can take it. So you were talking about a keto diet. What's interesting is I had a gentleman called Tom King on the show. He's the guy that founded Stevia. He was down in Peru and, was talking to the natives and ate a plant and said, this is really sweet. I think I'll make a sweetener out of it. But the big thing was he was a big keto proponent. And before I interviewed him, he actually sent me all the keto products he's developing, ketchups and mustards and things like that, and the books on it. And there was one thing that I remember him saying when I was talking about plant-based diets, because I talked to a lot of people who are on plant-based diets, especially, believe it or not, out in San Francisco. My friends out there,
For sure.
And when I was talking about it, he says he thought you all ate too much sugar from the fruits. So talk to that, one of you.
Okay, I love it. I absolutely love it when people tell me that you shouldn't eat fruit because fruit contains sugar. And as a result of that, you're going to get fat, your cholesterol is going to go up, and you're going to become more diabetic. What I think people fail to understand when they make these types of arguments is that a whole food, regardless of whether it's a fruit or a bean or quinoa, is a complex three-dimensional object. And inside of that three-dimensional object, you have a whole collection of many nutrients. So let's take a banana as an example, okay? Most people think of a banana as just being a pile of sugar, okay? But in reality, a banana has carbohydrate, protein, and fat. Those are three what are called macronutrients. In addition to those macronutrients, the banana also contains vitamins and minerals and fiber and water and antioxidants and phytochemicals. So these are called micronutrients. Now, the banana is a three-dimensional structure that is held together mainly by fiber molecules, and then interspersed amongst those fiber molecules is the carbohydrate, fat, protein, and the micronutrients. So when you eat that banana, you're actually intaking a whole ecosystem of many different nutrients. And when that ecosystem travels down into your small intestine and then eventually gains access to your blood, it takes time for your digestive system to break it down. It takes time for those nutrients to get inside of your blood. And that's actually a good thing because it limits the speed at which all these nutrients get access to your blood. And it allows tissues to be able to absorb these nutrients in a physiologically normal period of time. If instead you decided to eat a teaspoon of table sugar, what would happen is that the table sugar would have zero fiber, no water, no vitamins, no minerals, no antioxidants, and no phytochemicals. There would be no protein and there is no fat. So you're literally getting 100% sugar.
So is that when I hear people talk about slow sugars and fast sugars, Is that like fast sugar, a refined sugar, and slow sugars are the natural sugars in fruits and vegetables? Is that what they're referring to?
I want to believe that that is true, but I think people also consider fruit to be a, high glycemic, fast sugar, high carbohydrate / dangerous food. So I think they're moving in the right direction, but overall, the most important thing that I want people to understand here is that when you're eating a whole food that is unrefined, it hasn't gone through a manufacturing process, even if it tastes sweet, like you would find in a freshly grown Florida Kent mango, which is one of our favorite foods on the planet, right? When you're eating things that are extremely sweet, we think, oh, this is sugar, this is sugar, this is sugar. But I don't want people to think of it and equate it to sugar. I want people to think about it as, yeah, it has a natural sweetness, and the sweetness comes from glucose and from fructose, but those are actually fuels that your tissues can use. But there's a whole host of protective micronutrients that are packaged with that sweet flavor. And those protective micronutrients are actually the things that prevent and reverse chronic disease processes. That's the most important thing they can realize.
All right. Can I go back to Robby for a second? Robby, you were talking about the keto diet. And when I'm reading about you guys, I didn't know there was such a thing as a plant-based keto diet. It seems that it's an anathema to, I don't know. I don't even know how to ask the question. What is a plant-based keto diet?
It's gaining popularity, and this is a diet where you put yourself in ketosis by simply eating high-fat plant-based foods. So this is going to be things like oils. This is going to include avocado, lots of nuts and seeds. There's a few particular beans, lupini beans, that you can have on this diet. You're also going to get to have a lot of greens. Some non-starchy vegetables could be included because those have a lot of fiber, which does not count towards your total carbohydrate load when you're trying to stay in ketosis. So the fiber is okay. So if you're going to do a ketogenic diet, this would be the best option. It's the most nutrient dense. But the concern is there's no long-term data, and you're making yourself glucose intolerant. When you eat that diet, you are not able to then go and have a banana or a pint of blueberries without seeing an unhealthy glucose excursion. You'll see your blood glucose spike super high, and that's a concern. So we do not recommend a plant-based ketogenic diet.
So, pardon me, I'm a little slow sometimes. So what, if you eat a plant-based diet, everything that was included in the keto diet, you can eat as part of your plant-based diet, except the mix is different. Is that right? No?
So there's an important distinction. If you're going to truly execute a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet properly, you're going to have to become conscious and aware of how much of the high-fat plant-based foods you're consuming. So that's foods like, again, avocados, nuts and seeds, olives, soy products. So edamame is the most whole form of soy, but that's high in fat. It's 40% of calories coming from fat there. So to make this simple, we've actually put food into a traffic light system. We have a green light, yellow light, red light traffic system for people living with all forms of diabetes to know exactly what to eat. And those higher fat foods are put in the yellow category, whereas the green light category is going to include fruits, starchy vegetables, that's potatoes, yams, squashes. Then you're going to have beans, and you're going to have intact whole grains like farro and millet and quinoa. Then obviously non-starchy vegetables, leafy greens, herbs and spices, and mushrooms. Those are in the green light category. And you can actually eat those foods in large quantities. When you're hungry till you're full, you don't have to micromanage how much you have or how often you eat, because like Cyrus was saying, these foods have a complex package full of fiber and water. And when you put those together, you create bulk. And this bulk makes you feel satisfied and prevents you from eating too much food. And then the red light category, that's where we put in, animal products and highly processed foods. So things like soy, ice cream, and all these newer plant-based packaged foods are things we are not going to recommend if you want to truly reverse insulin resistance.
So I know you guys do a lot of coaching for people. I'm always curious about this. Is this the type of thing that's a one plan fits all people. So if I turn around to Bill when he gets back tonight after work, and I say, okay, here's the diet, right? Is it just, do you have to know something about Bill, to recommend a certain diet?
Absolutely. That's a great question, actually, because, in the world of nutrition, I think one of the main questions that people have is there a one size fits all approach? Robbie, Cyrus, what do you guys think? Is there only one diet that all human beings should be on? And personally, I think that it would be a little bit arrogant to believe that there's only one diet that every single human being should be on in order to maintain optimal health. That being said, I think there is actually a lot more commonality between individuals than most people are willing to believe. So if you took a room of 100 people and you tried to determine exactly what is the sort of optimal diet for each one of these people, I think there would be about 80% crossover, and that most people would benefit from a plant-rich diet. Now, in the world of research, there's many researchers, there's thousands of researchers across the world who are all trying to answer questions about nutrition. And the current scientific consensus, which is the decision that the most prominent researchers in the world have now come up to, is that eating a diet that is predominantly plants is considered the healthiest diet for short-term results and for long-term chronic disease reversal. So Bill, as an example, he might say to us, hey guys, I don't want to eat a completely plant-based diet. And I would say, okay, Bill, it's no problem. If what my goal is not to turn you into a vegetarian or turn Bill into a vegan. That's not the point. The point is to try and get people to understand that by eating more plant-rich material, that they can significantly improve their diabetes health. And if you're willing to go all the way and adopt a fully plant-based diet, then you're probably going to get the best benefits for sure. But, everybody has, different shapes, different sizes, different activity levels. And so it's important to understand that there's going to be subtle bio-individuality, but the overall message is pretty clear.
All right. So I have two questions. One's sort of silly and you probably expect. The other is, I'm just curious. So plant-based diet versus vegetarian versus vegan. What are we talking about here?
Oh, so what do those words mean? Okay. If we're referring to a plant-based diet is basically a diet that contains mostly plant material. So I like to think of a plant-based diet as basically containing about 80% plant-based material. So what that would mean, for every 10 pieces of food that you put into your mouth, if about 8 of those are plant-based foods and only 2 of those come from the animal world, then that's what I would consider to be a plant-based diet. Or you can think of it as a plant-focused diet. A vegetarian diet is basically a plant-based diet in which you're only incorporating dairy foods in exception to those plants. So you're eating, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and then dairy in addition to that. That's what a vegetarian diet is. And then when it comes to a vegan diet, we're referring to a 100% plant-based diet. So no meat, no chicken, no fish, no dairy products, no eggs. 100% fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains.
So that means the two of you are vegans. Is that
the two of us are vegans, but here's the most important thing. The two of us are vegans by choice. Now, the two of us are vegans because we decided that we both wanted to do it, and we saw such tremendous improvement in our own personal health from going all the way to being 100% vegan that it made us feel fantastic, and it's a very simple decision. One thing that I will say is that we have coached, literally thousands of people through this process. And there's a lot of people who are eating a vegetarian diet. So that's like, mainly plant-based with small amounts of dairy. So they'll have things like ice cream or milk or cheese, and they won't be able to get the results they're looking for. They can't lose weight very easily. They might be inflamed. Their joints hurt. Their muscles hurt. Their blood glucose is high. Their blood pressure is high. By making that simple decision to just get rid of dairy products and then turn themselves into 100% plant-based, that's the moment at which all of a sudden everything changes and they start to see tremendous improvement in their overall health, and diabetes tends to just fade away into the background.
I have a question. Maybe, Robbie, you can handle it. So I'm just assuming the two of you probably have an entire change in your lifestyle. Not only do you eat plant-based diets, you have exercise programs. You're doing everything to mitigate the diabetes, I'm assuming, right?
Yes.
So, Robbie, like, is there a time that you all, based on the way you treat yourself, your intake, your exercise, is there ever a time that you're not taking insulin? Ever?
So since we're living with type 1 diabetes, our beta cells inside our pancreas do not produce insulin. They have been damaged. So we continue to take insulin every time we want to eat any sort of carbohydrate-rich food. If we didn't eat any carbohydrate-rich food, you still need a basal level of insulin. So people who have damaged beta cell production, we take insulin until there's some magical treatment that is created.
All right. So I know you guys have a consulting business. Do you have any books out or anything?
Yes, actually, we just wrote a book, and the book actually is becoming available on February 18th of this year of 2020. And the book is called Mastering Diabetes. And in this book, we teach you how to reverse the underlying cause of blood glucose, of high blood glucose, and that's called insulin resistance. So we literally walk you through the science that your doctor never taught you about diabetes. Because the sad truth is that most people living with diabetes, they just never learned diabetes. They never actually understood the biology. So we teach you the biology from the ground up. And then once you understand the biology, we then teach you exactly how to manipulate your diet to your advantage so that you can start to see tremendous improvement and reverse insulin resistance so that your blood glucose comes down. The beauty of this method and the beauty of what we teach in this book is that, yes, it is about diabetes for sure. If you're living with any form of diabetes, you will greatly benefit from this. But it goes so much farther than diabetes. And usually what we find is that when people come to us, they have a high blood glucose value or they're using a lot of insulin. They start to adopt this, and all of a sudden, so many other things start to improve. Their blood pressure drops, their cholesterol level drops. They start to lose weight for the first time and keep it off. Their energy levels go up. Their skin clears up. They can think more clearly. And as a result of that, it's a total body transformation from head to toe. So if you are interested, pick up a copy of this book. I think it'll really sort of change the way you think about diabetes and hopefully set you give you the progress and give you the impetus to really change your life for the better.
How did they get the
And
book?
we can't forget the meal plan, Cyrus. The honest, no, it's true, because you asked this question about Bill. Like, what do I do? Like, how do I explain? Like, it is a step-by-step plan of exactly what to eat, when to eat, based on your baseline level of insulin resistance. You take a quiz. There's 2 different meal plans in there, and you follow it step by step, and the results are basically guaranteed.
Based on the conversation I'm having with you guys, it seems that this book would be not only for diabetics, and I live in a community where there are really a lot of type 2 diabetics, right? So I would recommend this highly for them, but it seems that I don't have diabetes, and I'm not sure I'm going to get type 2, although my mother did have type 2, so maybe it's in the cards. But it seems like even for me, reading this book, sans diabetes would still be a way to move forward on my diet and the care of my body and my health and all that. So I think you've got an audience probably more than just diabetics out there, although they certainly could use this. But if I had to promote it and do the social media on this, I would expand your target audience on that.
Well, let me give you a sobering statistic here. Everybody hates statistics, but I think this one's actually pretty important. Currently, you said at the very beginning, there's 30 million people around the United States that have diagnosed diabetes, type 1 or type 2. There are 85 million more people that are living with prediabetes / insulin resistance and don't even know it. That's 115 million people around the United States. That's 1 in 3 people that has some version of insulin resistance / diabetes. And even though you haven't had a diagnosis from a doctor, chances are you would greatly benefit from this. And just like you're saying, and it could really transform your metabolic health from the inside out.
All right, let's do the sell now, right? How do they get in touch with you? They're going to buy the book. They can pre-order it on Amazon or not yet, or...
You can get this book everywhere books are sold. Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can get it at Target. You can get it at Walmart.
It's out now.
It's February 18th is when it's out.
February 18th. I will pick up.
So we also read the audiobook, and we added some extra material to the audiobook so people can pick that up on Audible. They can get it on Kindle. They can get it on Apple Books. So it's available everywhere. And you can connect with us on our website. That's the best place to go, mastering.diabetes.org. You can get a lot of great recipes there, a lot of further information. And we're all over social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, at Mastering Diabetes. You can't miss us. And we love connecting with everybody.
All right. Maybe someday I have to get you guys down here. I could certainly arrange a huge auditorium and a huge audience for you guys. So if you're ever coming into these markets, you'll let me know. And I'd love to have you on again at another point. So thanks, Cyrus. Thanks, Robby. This was great. It was really great.
David, thank you so much for what you do. I mean, I know you're spreading, the best information you can possibly spread, and you're doing a phenomenal job. And we really appreciate the opportunity to come on today. So thank you very much.
You are sweet. Thanks so much.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get...
As we come to the close of another week of Yak About Today, I want to thank you again for listening. Remember, you can go to yakabouttoday.com to listen to any of our shows, or if you are new here and listening to one of the podcast networks that carry us, consider subscribing. And remember, you can write to us at david@yakabouttoday.com or follow us on Facebook or Twitter at YakAboutToday. I'm David Yakir, and I hope that we can chat next time. Same place, anytime you're free to listen. Peace.